A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay, and welcome to the Dan Nichols Show studios. A bit of cross-pollination on the shows this evening, having just come off set from one show and jumping onto set for the other. Now, we just had a huge amount of fun with the Dan Nichols Show. We had Nabuhle Dlamini, the professional golfer who plays this week in the Joburg Ladies Open at Soweto Country Club. We had Robbie Collins, the actor and comedian, Tabrez Shamsi, currently the world's #1 ranked T20 bowler, the Proteas spinner, and we had Garrick Hugo, who won on the European Tour at the weekend, who was live from Tenerife, but not one of them mentioned wine, so I'm long overdue a conversation on matters far more important, and wine is top of that particular list. Now, it is a busy week coming up this week. We have Peter Tempelhoff in our recorded episode that'll be on the show tomorrow morning, where we look at the brand new restaurant he's got beyond at Baden Verwachting, as well as some of the wines from that famed Constantia estate. And we've got some more great live tasting for you a little later on this week. I think we've got the wines of Cavalli, amongst others, on Thursday. But today we've got some wine from two wonderful women in the South African wine industry, one with some bubbles, and the second, she only makes 2 wines, but gee, does she make them well. The lady in question is Callan Williams. You might know her as the Garajeest, which is dreadfully spelt unless it's done deliberately for a reason, which I suspect it is, but we'll let Callan give us that particular story a little later on in the show. We start, though, with bubbles, and it will come as no surprise that we're continuing our celebration of 50 years of Cap Classique in South Africa, 50 years of fabulous South African bubbles, and the latest one that we are adding to the list of wine I'm only drinking for the purposes of research and no more is the Genevieve, and this is the 2015 Blanc de Blanc, and it comes to us from a lady called Melissa Nelsen, who now joins me for the very first time on Dan Really Likes Wine. Melissa, a very good evening, warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine.
Hi Dan, lovely to be joining you.
I'm absolutely delighted to have you with me. Let's kick off with this broader element of celebration, because it's justifying for me drinking vast amounts of bubbles through the course of this year, because we are celebrating 50 years of South Africa taking what the French did and making it better. How much does that 50 years mean to you? How much of a sense of celebration do you have in 2021?
I think it's great, and I'm so glad that the Cap Classique Association is really pushing this. I think Cap Classique in South Africa has come in leaps and bounds, and the quality out there is really worth celebrating. So it's really great that we can celebrate the 50 years and let people out there know and more about that. You know, we've been making the bubbles for 50 years. There's been producers doing that. And it also allows people to just, start looking at different types of bubbles that they haven't been trying. So I think it's just great awareness to Cap Classique and yeah, leaps and bounds. It's great.
Well, let's go into one of those that is, I suppose, a little more bespoke. It's one of the brands that is maybe lesser known, but much celebrated by those who do know, and that is your particular brand. Tell us about the story, how you got into this space, why bubbles, and where the name Genevieve comes from.
Bubbles is I just absolutely have always had a passion for it, not coming from a winemaking background. I got into it when coming to the area of Bot River, and my partner is a viticulturist and got into winemaking as well. And I kept on pushing him to make bubbles, and he turned around one day and he said, "No, I think you can try." That's how I started with the investigation on how to make bubbles, a lot of research. I was very fortunate to visit Champagne a couple of times and really evolve an idea of a recipe and where I'd like the brand to develop to and what kind of base we should start with. So the first vintage was in 2008, which we released in 2010. Always done a straight Chardonnay Blanc de Blanc. There's a beautiful little pocket of Chardonnay down the Van der Stel Pass in Bot River. And those vineyards they're about 20 years old, so they're giving beautiful characteristics. And that for me was really important, is to stick to the terroir and what the grapes were giving me. So over the years, we have shifted in quality and just learning and becoming more aware to the vineyards. So now we age the bubbles for a minimum of 3 years. The 2015 that you have there has been aged for 4 years. And the idea around the Genevieve is that the style that I make it in is a lot of elegance. For me, it's quite important that just because I'm only making the one, there's a couple more on the way, but the Blanc de Blanc is really elegant. And for me, it's important that once you've opened it, you have the idea that you could finish the bottle. So a lot of elegance, but lots of quality in the bottle as well. The name Genevieve, it's my middle name, and my parents had spent some time in France, and that was going to be my first name, and then they came back, and Melissa was the first name. So and it's also the patron saint of Paris. So I thought that seemed fit and just for the bubbles.
There we go. A Parisian name for somebody making Method Champenoise is entirely appropriate. And it is a wine that has been absolutely flying, which is rather appropriate because if you weren't making Cap Classique, Melissa, you'd be aboard an aeroplane, wouldn't be? Because you're a pilot as well as a winemaker.
Yeah, I'm now has been, but that was my first job. It was there, and I still think that if I had continued being a pilot, probably this would be my hobby. So but it was, I think that idea of doing things by yourself, but being in a community is very similar to the flying industry and the winemaking industry. It is quite a small industry. It's a very open information industry. So very fortunate to have been part of both.
So no flying at the moment, certainly in the literal sense, if not in the metaphorical. Not just your own work, though. You mentioned your partner. I believe your mum also had a big influence in guiding you to where we find you today.
Yes, very independent lady, and opened my awareness to just leaping forward in life. The first why I became a pilot is I was very resistant to sitting in an office, and I thought, what could I do that would just allow me to be out there? And I thought, first of all, what about an air hostess? And she looked at me and she said, if you're going to be the air hostess, why don't you be the pilot? And that just opened my whole, awareness to, well, what is possible and where what can I achieve? So that she had a big influence on my. Yeah, looking at the bigger picture always.
You've had now, say 11 years of wine coming out, roughly by my calculation. Well, what's that journey been like in terms of you understanding the world of Cap Classique and creating something that you really feel has got your own signature to it?
I think the number one for me was when I created the Genevieve was always to stick to the signature of Genevieve, which is elegance. It's beautiful drinkable bubbles that always has underlying quality and structure coming from that. And over the years, it's just reinforced that fact that in order to put Cap Classique out to South Africa and to the world, quality is of utmost importance. Also, aging of bubbles, for me, that has been a very important thing, to release the bubbly at least after only 3 years. I just find that there's more finesse that comes from the bubbles and from the taste. So it's been a learning curve, but a very exciting and a very gentle one as well, I suppose. I think because Cap Classique has become more trendy over the years. When I started out in 2010, it would only be a celebratory drink. It would only be at a wedding or Christmas. And now you can go out and people will be drinking bubbly the entire evening without moving on to something else. So for me, that the growth of Cap Classique in South Africa and worldwide has really been, it's been a great thing to see. And I'm very proud to have been part of that as well.
So 13 years ago, since Captain Melissa became Melissa the winemaker, what's been the low point of that journey? And then what's been the one that's brought you the biggest smile?
The low point, I think, was sort of in the beginning. I'd started releasing the first production I did in 2008, I released in 2010, and it was 5,000 bottles. I was very fortunate that it sold very quickly, and I moved on to the next vintage very quickly, and got into the wrong cycle of releasing the bubbles too quickly. And in 2010, mid 2010, I basically pulled all selling of the Cap Classique anywhere and just let myself get back, or the bubbles get back into a cycle of aging. So it was about 1.5 years that I didn't really sell any Cap Classique. But we're now in the great cycle of being able to release 3 years or longer. So that was a bit of a dip financially, but also, just realizing that the patience is not only in the wine maturing, but also in financially as well. The highs, they're constant. 2017, I bought a farm in Bot River. My grapes are always from Bot River, but it was quite important for me to have a house for the brand. And we now have a tasting room and cottages, and it's lovely to have people come visit and experience, and me seeing them experience the Genevieve. I think that's the happy moment.
You have plenty of fans. I see Melissa Sutherland saying that she was given a bottle for a birthday treat, and I can hear the smile in her voice as she types that out. I think, Melissa, it wasn't a bottle that lasted very long, but I don't think it ever would with these particular bottles. And Johan van Eyck, hi, Melissa. Nice to see you and hear your voice again. Bot River, for me, it's a fascinating part of our South African wine landscape. It's a little quieter. It doesn't get quite the PR of some of the bigger stretches, but we look at the Mad Ginger up at Luddite. We look at the wonders Sebastian is creating down at Beaumont. There are some exceptional producers. For me, and certainly just my opinion, it consistently punches above its weight, and for a really small area, it does deliver some consistently outstanding wine.
I totally agree with you. I think what made me fall in love with Bot River is that each of the winemakers here, you mentioned Luddite and Beaumont, they've been striving to make, to put a lot of passion into certain varietals. Luddite with their Shiraz, Sebastian Beaumont with his Chenin, and that was part of the pull to Bot River, is that the winemakers, the wineries, they're passionate about what they're doing, and they just get on with it, and whatever they bring out is quality stuff, and they've got great stories. And as Niels from Luddite always says, we're in the center of the universe, Bot River.
I can actually hear Neil saying exactly that. Possibly wearing a pink tutu and some oversized boots. He has some interesting fashion choices, does the man behind Luddite. He, of course, is so well known now for that Luddite Shiraz, and it's become a cult brand in South Africa. Likewise, Sebastian with his Hope Marguerite. Was there a similar philosophy that said to you, right, I just want to make bubbles, I just want this one area of focus?
For me, it was definitely that. I think to focus solely on Cap Classique, and there's, as the more I go into it, the more I see, the more there's so much experimentation that can be done with Cap Classique, and that for me, there's amazing winemakers out there, and they are doing amazing Shiraz, amazing whatever. But I'd really like to stick to Cap Classique. Never say never, but that is my greatest passion, and I just think with Cap Classique, there's also very little space for fault, and that sort of pushes the boundaries in perfection and creating something that's really clean and honest. And that for me is, it's part of the goal is to try and create something that nature gives you, and then just looking after it so well that you can present it to people.
I think your love of the classic champagne style, coupled with a French middle name, was always going to push you towards bringing in Chardonnay and creating a Blanc de Blanc. And I want you to drink that with us in just a moment and give us the detailed introduction. Now that you've got such a fabulous and well-established Cap Classique, is there a sense of, well, maybe it's time to push those Cap Classique boundaries out a little?
I am a little. The farm that we bought in Bot River had two varietals on the farm. One was Sauvignon Blanc, which we promptly grafted over to Chardonnay, and then there was Shiraz. And I've So I've been experimenting with the Shiraz on the farm, and it's a beautiful clone. It's a beautiful block. We've put a lot of effort into it. And so I'll be releasing a Shiraz Rosé in May, coming shortly. And for me, that was really important as well to bring that finesse to a rosé bubbles. It's the 180 to the typical Australian Shiraz rosé. It's not the syrupy sweetness. It's beautiful and light, and so I'm very excited about that. And that's experimentation has happened there, I'm very pleased to show it to people, and I think it's going to do really well.
I'm sneaking a couple of glasses while I'm off camera of the Cap Classique, and I'm getting a wonderfully honeyed finish on what's a beautiful wine. Just before we dive into it from a slightly more technical and personal perspective from you, we have a lot of people on the show who are still a little early on in their wine journey. For you, the fact that Chardonnay is so widely used clearly suggests that it's successful. Why is Chardonnay in general, this Bot River Chardonnay in particular, just so perfect for you in terms of making Genevieve?
The Bot River Chardonnay, I find, is a very delicate Chardonnay compared to other areas. So the acidity, when we pick it at high acidity, but it's a very gentle flavors when you pick it. It's one of the first grapes you're picking of the season, of the harvest. And I just find with the Chardonnay grapes and our maritime influence, we really do get nice flavors that are quite full, but are still showing great acidity. So for me, that's been quite important from Bot River. And, there's other Chardonnay blocks from different regions show different characteristics, but it's something that I fell in love with because of the gentleness around the Chardonnay from this area.
And is it fair to say then, by extension, just as Franchuk and Robertson are waging this cheerful wars to the capital of sorts of Cap Classique and making some great Cap Classique, they've each got their own particular approach, their own particular style that the more nuanced palate will probably pick up more often than not. So too, there's the potential for Bot River to develop that own small signature style that the Genevieve is headlining.
I hope so. I sincerely hope so. I think, with the wineries in Robertson and Stellenbosch, the number one thing is always quality, and they really are doing it. So for me, anyone who's making amazing quality bubbles in the appropriate manner is great. And I think, Bot River, there is capacity for that, but in the same sense, it's individual as well. If someone has the passion and they are making beautiful bubbles, then we should be proudly South African about that.
I've got a few more comments coming in from different parts of the world. Lisa Harlow, who sends us a message from the UK. I'm very lucky to be able to find Melissa's MCC here in the UK. I love the leaf notes and I love Bot River. Thank you, Lisa. And then from Sabi Sands up in the fringe of the Kruger National Park, Cheetah Plains, Reginald Peckmiller, the resident sommelier, the MCC Queen. South Africa is so grateful to have you. Absolutely indelible. Thank you, Reggie, a regular viewer of the show. So you've got plenty of fans. Let us find out why, Melissa, and climb into the glass. If I'll ask you to have one in hand as well. And for those who are not lucky enough, as you and I are, to have the wine with us, to just talk through it and what stands out for you.
Great. So with the 2015, it was a phenomenal year. It's one of the, I know we're going offline here, but I've also, on really phenomenal years, I make a little zero dosage as well. And 2015 was one of those years. So it's a lovely full nose, delicate hints of nectarine and a bit of green fig that come to the nose. And what I love about the 2015 now, it's starting to show a little bit of honey toast to it as well. So really fine mousse on the palate. There's quite, because of the extended lease time, which has been 4 years, you get quite lovely secondary flavors coming through, and that's where the toastiness will come through. There's a slight hints of honey coming through now as we're the end of the vintage of the 2015. And that's always a sad moment to me, because it's we release it when it's ready, but there are subtle changes over the time of selling it. And when we get to this little slight honey taste, I really go, oh, that's lovely. So there's a little richness in the subtle flavors there. For me, that's quite important, that when you have your first sip, you allow that fine mousse to come through, but it lends towards taking another sip and just enjoying it.
And then another, and then another, and then another. That lovely. It's bittersweet in both ways. Both, as you say, the vintage is coming to an end, but also you've got that honey against the background of some slightly sharper notes. But it is the reason why somebody as esteemed in the art of wine criticism as Bubbles Highland says, "Hello, gorgeous Melissa, the unofficial queen of bubbly. Love the zero dosage. My favorite." Bubs Highland, who of course we revealed on the show a few months ago, is actually Mildred Highland. Not many people knew that was her first name. And Lisa Harlow, zero allure dosage, long lease age, makes the best MCC as good as champagne. Just a quick technical note there, and we've mentioned it on the show once or twice before, but again, it's the kind of thing that people will sometimes hear, and if they don't know, they're possibly a little afraid to ask. When you say zero dosage, what does that mean?
So zero dosage is when there's no added sugar to the end product. So the bubbles will go through the first fermentation in tank or barrel. In my case, it's in tank, and then goes into the bottle for the second fermentation. And then when you go through the riddling process and releasing of the sediment in the bottle, you lose some liquor, and you have to refill it with dosage. In most cases, sugar will be added then, because you've picked it at such a high acidity, low sugar point. And I always say it's like adding salt and pepper to your stew. It just brings out beautiful aromas. So sugar is not bad, and it's very minimal. But in certain years, I make a zero dosage, and that's where we add no added sugar to the final product. And it's in years where it's really phenomenal, where the wine is, it can really stand out by itself. In France, they call it the naked wine, a naked, brut nature or zero dosage.
Oh, there we go. Coming from the expert. If you can find some, and it is very rare, grab hold of it and do not give it to anybody else. Drink it all yourself. You will thoroughly enjoy it. Just before we let you go there, Melissa, we're having a wonderful celebration, and it's great to be able to do so with you. We're celebrating 50 years of Cap Classique in South Africa, which is both a time of reflection and looking back and celebrating, but also looking forward, if not to the next 50 years, then certainly to that slightly more immediate future, immediate horizon. Where do you see the Genevieve brand going? Where would you like to take it beyond what you've told us about that slight extension of the brand? But then also Cap Classique in South Africa. What do we need to do more of? What do we still need to get a little more right, so to speak?
Yeah, Genevieve worldwide. But that would, slowly but surely. I think for me, the greatest thing is to meet people or receive an email from someone on the other side of the world, and they've tasted the Genevieve. That still makes my heart skip a beat and think, wow, they've done that, or they've tried it. Greater spreading of the Genevieve. And for Cap Classique in general, I think we really are on a great path. I think that consistency, and I think if the more we do together as a Cap Classique association, worldwide and local, and just spreading the word that the products that we're bringing out are genuine quality, and that's the most important thing, and just being able to show that.
Elizabeth Bardan, who's watching, saying, wonderful to see women doing great things in wine. Well, Melissa is a terrific example thereof. So too is Bubs Highland, who says, Mildred, people are going to start taking you seriously, Dan, as they should. Bubs' full name, of course, is Mildred Agatha Petronella Highland. Please tell all your friends and spread it on social media. And my mother is watching. I'm going to go rap on the knuckles now. Hello, Nicole. Hope to send Melissa an email myself one of these days. If he ever arrives, make sure you have plenty of stock and security on hand. Melissa, thank you. It's been a real treat, not just sharing the Genevieve with you, but also getting a little of the story behind it. I'm very glad you're not flying anymore and are instead making bubbles. Can't wait to try the extensions to the brand as it stands. And good luck in a year of celebration and many more celebrations to come. Melissa, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. Love it.
Melissa Nelsen down in Pod River. Coming to us from London, Greg Sherwood saying hello from London. There we go, the master of wine and the unofficial global head of PR for Nordea Wines. Hello there, Mr. Sherwood. Lovely to see you. And lovely too to see our second guest this evening, who joins us also from a dissimilar part of the world. And she is arguably Zimbabwe's greatest ever winemaker, because that's where she hails from, now making wines under the Garajeest label. It's Callan Williams. Callan, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you?
I should say Maneru. I think that's about that. So
good to see you, Dan.
How on earth does a Zimbabwean end up studying wine in Stellenbosch and then in some rural corner of Zimbabwe, in South Africa, making two absolutely fabulous wines?
Sure, Dan. So I set out to be a ballet dancer, not going to agriculture whatsoever, but there was a pull to study cattle at Elsenburg, and I quickly fell in love with science and the vineyard, and opted to study winemaking instead, which I'm very grateful to have been on this journey thus far.
If I remember my upbringing, wine in Zimbabwe was kind of the lower end of the South African spectrum that could find its way across the border. There was the odd bottle of Douglas Green or the uniquely shaped Johannesburger. Well, what was your wine history, your wine background with your family?
Absolutely no background in the industry whatsoever. So I started studying at Elsenburg straight after school, and my family moved from Zim when I was quite young. I still have family in Zim, and went to school in South Africa, and after school just pushed to Elsenburg. So no background with wine at all.
And yet you fell into it quite so naturally. And I'm always fascinated when there are people for whom wine has not been a big part of their background, they're growing up, who then discover the magic of it. What flicked the switch for you with wine?
I'm just very passionate about it was actually mainly the vineyard. I fell in love with everything to do with the vineyard, the soil, the terroir. Science is a passion of mine as well. So I just think the combination of all the elements that are involved in making wine, it's an art, it's a science, it's passion, it's senses, just the beauty of it all together. I really just fell in love with it, and I'm glad that you say I've taken naturally to it. It's a lot of hard work, but it definitely is a feeling as well as a skill. So that was really the pull around the reasoning why I decided to go that direction after school.
So the Zimbabwean who could have been a cattle farmer instead decided to try and learn how to make wine. What was the journey from making wine at Elsenburg to now having the slightly misspelled Garajeest brand?
So after Elsenburg, I did make wine at a few estates as first cellar rat, then assistant, then junior, and eventually I decided to go on my own. It's been a very difficult journey. Firstly, sourcing grapes, sourcing the region, the right terroir, finding my style, as well as hitting all the red flags possible with regards to licenses. And, you really do get thrown in the deep end. But I'm grateful that everyone that I've encountered on the way has been willing to help guide me and give me advice. And slowly but surely, I have built this brand that I'm so proud of. And I do hope, and I'm very happy that people are starting to get to know the brand and the wines both locally and internationally. So it really is a dream that's been realized, and it feels so surreal, but it's magical. It really is.
There are obviously a few reasons for the rise and rise and rise and rise of the Garajeest. One of them is that you're clearly a very talented winemaker, and you show that in the wine we're going to be trying in just a moment. Another of those, the name and the aesthetic and the packaging, which are all very striking, and they get people's attention very quickly. Let's start with that name. There's obviously a lot of fun to it, a lot of playfulness. Was that your own work? How did you come up with it?
So, there's a lot of playfulness. It is a very rock and roll brand, quite rebellious, goes against the norm of the industry. So the whole idea around the brand is wines inspired by the music. I grew up listening to old school rock and roll, and that again it's just an interest and a passion of mine. So it just made sense to have a brand that represents me and what I love. So I have Bruce and Jim, which are inspired by music icons, Springsteen and Jim Morrison of The Doors, and the whole packaging is very much me as well. So I worked with a company called White Space, who I love to bits. They've been on this journey with me from the beginning, and we try to develop a brand that best represents what I want the brand to represent, which is almost this reverse wine snob feel where, I really wanted people to talk about wine, premium wine, and get people speaking about unknown cultivars and feeling that they can relate to the brand with getting rid of more of the pretentious side of wine. And I really believe that I have accomplished that. So the brand and the labels are very rock and roll, and everything, all the neck tags are hand tied, and the name itself, the Garajeest, which is spelled phonetically, as I wanted to trademark it and give trademark. You can't actually trademark a term, but the way I spelt it phonetically, I can actually trademark it as my own. And I was hoping that people would be able to pronounce it a lot easier. So Garajeest comes from the 1950s rebellious movement, where the winemakers in France were tired of their wine being classified under appellation. So there was a bit of a rebellious movement where they started to make wine in their garages, which was quite sought after and became very popular and known. And it's now the term's become more widespread for any independent producer who isn't attached to a wine estate as such. So that's where I ran with the name, and that's basically a summary around the brand itself.
Very cunning, these Zimbabweans, coming up with enormously clever ideas with added layers. I have to be honest, when I first saw the labels, Jim and Bruce, I thought, well, here's somebody who, like me, grew up in Zimbabwe watching Neighbours on television, because Jim and Bruce, they do sound like two people who'd be living next door to you on Neighbours, a couple of Australian blokes, but they're not. They are rock stars, and the wine themselves are rock stars. And you've got two of them. Talking now to Melissa and her focus on Cap Classique, you've gone with a focus on two grapes that are both fabulous, both sit in, if not niche, then certainly the lesser of the varieties that we see in terms of volume and attention in South Africa. Let's start with the first of those. Why Semillon, Callan?
So I went, I had no strategy coming out of my studies and making wine for various estates. I really didn't have a strategy with what I wanted to produce or put on the market, except I just knew that I loved Semillon and I loved Cabernet Franc. So I really wanted to make wines that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I wanted to make them in a style that I love, but that I know that my friends and family also love. So it was just very simple that they're my favorite two cultivars, and I wanted to perfect them to the best of my ability. And that's actually why I went with the two cultivars that I've gone with.
All right. Well, we're trying the first one now. Just before I introduce it, I see Mildred is back again. Mildred Highland. Hello, my friend. Looking so glam for a rock groupie stroke winemaker. I suspect there's some coded adulation. Now, we can't call her Bubs on this show. It is Mildred Agatha Petronella. Very important. Now, Bubs' partner in crime and so many wine adventures is the great wine writer, Maylie Lambert. And I know she is almost medically obsessed with Semillon. And I think there's a real sense, whether it's the green Semillon, the old vine Semillon, just Semillon as a whole, there's a bit of a revival in South Africa and a bit of understanding, not just of how good it is, but also in the right hands. And yours would be a good example, just what potential there is with Semillon.
Absolutely. I'm really excited as to how Semillon has actually taken in the industry in terms of being paired with a lot of dishes, and I just have a lot more friends and family and customers who are a lot more interested in the varietal, and also just accepting Semillon as a everyday drinking wine and not just for a special occasion. And that is really what I wanted to achieve with the brand as a whole. So it's very exciting how, I've just seen more of a bit of a movement. It's not just a niche wine. It's actually becoming quite a popular wine to drink on all occasions. It used to be quite a hand sell and a little bit of a difficult sell, and people didn't know how to pronounce it. And if someone doesn't know how to pronounce it, they're a bit reluctant to purchase it. And you've got a lot of people who are very brand loyal as well as cultivar loyal, so it's often Sauvignon Blanc and Merlot. So it is quite exciting to see how the dynamic is changing among people locally and internationally, where they're wanting to experience new cultivars and as well as new brands. So I'm very excited about how Semillon has taken off in South Africa, and I love the style that I make, and I'm very proud of Jim.
And I think Jim, who is, of course, Jimi Hendrix, would be very proud. No, it wasn't Jim Hendrix.
Morrison.
Yeah, sorry, wrong one. Jim Morrison. But
it can be Jimi Hendrix. It's fine.
Yeah, this is definitely Jim Morrison. And I can picture him gently drinking this while throwing a TV out of a hotel window from the 17th floor.
Whilst writing a poem.
Exactly. You talk on the label of this being a seductive wine, and seductive is a really good word. But if I bring it down to a slightly more pragmatic interpretation, again, for people at home who are scrambling onto the internet to buy this by the case, what are they getting in this glass? What sets it apart?
So how I've made this wine is I call it an approachable wine. So I tend to stay away from the term easy drinking. I prefer approachable. So it's still a serious wine. It's very elegant, very juicy. It's a winter and summer wine. It can be paired with food, or you can drink it on its own. So it's very versatile. I have aged it surly. I've done 50% barrel ferment and 50% tank ferment, and in an oxidative style. So as you leave your wine in the glass, Dan, it's just going to develop over time. And if you actually leave it overnight, you'll be very surprised in the morning as well. So it's just a beautiful, round, approachable, elegant wine. So when someone drinks it, I think that they're going to be very pleased. It's not, if someone likes Sauvignon Blanc, but they also like a Chardonnay, and they're not so sure what a Sem is, I insert it in the middle there. So it's a very pleasing wine.
It's the best. There we go. That's a very objective perspective from the that wine. I love that you mentioned the Sauvignon Blanc there, because for me, those people who are absolutely stuck in their ways, I'm only drinking Sauvignon Blanc. Semillon is such a nice way to guide you out of Sauvignon Blanc and bring you back.
But the acidity is still there. So it's that nice medium.
I see Charmaine Walters with a question mark. Leave wine in the glass, a concept with which she is unfamiliar. And I know my mother Helen, who's watching in Belfast,
can resist.
the concept of leaving wine overnight. Again, something that is doubtless puzzling her at the moment. So that is the Semillon, that is the Jim. Let's say goodbye to Jim and say g'day to Bruce, the other of our neighbours. And this one's really cool. Just the again, the playfulness on the label, the tribute that you've got there to Bruce Springsteen. And it's one of those things, I think, Callan, where it's very easy to accuse people in the wine industry of going all poetic and surreal and not being terribly feet on the ground. And yet you really can bring food, wine, music together in this kind of sense, and get a feeling that you have captured that music, that poetry in the wine itself.
Yeah, Dan. So the whole idea around music and wine is really how, there's such an emotion attached to your favorite song, and you feel that emotion because it's linked to a memory by association. And it's the same as when you have your wine. I mean, you sniff on your wine and you remember your granny's hand cream, and that's a memory linked to an emotion by association. So everything is linked to our memories and our feelings and our emotions and our senses. And I think it's just such a beautiful way to draw everything together, all the most important elements of life, which is wine, food, music, family, friends. I think that's what we should be celebrating all the time. So I really enjoy the link, and that's where I really wanted to develop on that concept, is to try and tie it in. And I've tried I've tried to capture that in my philosophy, in my brand.
And you've done so off the platform of Cabernet Franc, which, like Semillon, is enjoying a real resurgence, a renaissance. And there's so much Cabernet Franc that has escaped the shackles of a blend and is now showing itself off on its own terms. There is a very particular style to your Cabernet Franc, and it stands out immediately. Talk us through why that style, what gives it that style?
So, again, as a winemaker, I would consider myself a very feminine winemaker. So I do have a very elegant, delicate style of making wine. I'm very pulled towards the cool climate regions, and again, just making approachable wines. So the style is very elegant. Not like your typical Cabernet Francs in South Africa, which are a lot more bolder and maybe could come across as more tannic and heavier and more masculine. So this Bruce Cabernet Franc, it is a big wine. It can be served with your lamb and your steaks, but it can also be, very temperature controlled, and it can be served chilled and maybe with, some lighter styled meals. So I wanted to make a versatile wine, a wine that you could be drinking now or you could age for years to come. So both wines are very elegant, cool climate wines. My region is Algan, which is the coldest wine region in the country, and I enjoy working in that region very, very much. Because it's such a cold region, the grapes have a longer honeying period on the vine. So everything just develops gradually and in balance. So it just makes way for such high quality grapes. It's beautiful. They're phenologically ripe. The terroir is stunning. The acidity is high. And as a winemaker, I do use a lot of acidity as well as oxygen in my winemaking style, which is generally oxidative, which is considered an old world winemaking style, but the actual drinking style is new world, which is confusing. But so I like to use oxygen as a tool in my winemaking method. So this Bruce Cabernet Franc is made in an oxidative style in a big open fermenter. It never sees a reductive environment because it goes from an open fermenter straight into barrel for aging, so which is microoxygenation. I also choose to bottle with natural corks, which also just aids in the bottle aging of the wines.
Oh, I think this
was a mouthful.
But a wonderful mouthful, and it is a tribute to Bruce Springsteen. And I think Cabernet Franc has come out of those Badlands days. It's now into its glory days. You can feel the hungry heart of it. It's definitely tougher than the rest. And if I close my eyes, I almost feel I'm dancing in the dark. Really.
Cheers to that. Like music to my ears.
That is terrific. I remember this was actually first suggested to me by my good friend David Higgs, who said you must try this wine, and I'm very grateful that he pushed it in my direction. A quick question for you from Peter Hanakom, who is watching. Yeast or wild yeast, he wishes to know.
So I do make use of yeast. However, I don't inoculate until the wild yeast has started fermenting.
Well, there we go. Thank you, Peter. And
hello. I hope you're well.
Loads of questions, loads of comments coming in. Before we do let you go, what I would like to know is, as much as we inquired of Melissa as to what comes next for her, you've got the Semillon, you've got the Cabernet Franc. Are you planning on extending the range at all? And what does the future hold for Garajeest?
So I'm so excited you asked me that. I am extending the range, so stay tuned. Next year is going to be quite a big year for the Garajeest. I am also looking at a house for the Garajeest, as Melissa called it. So stay tuned on that. And I do bring out a Magnum under the Signature series every couple of years. I have brought out the Jagger as well as Cobain, and they are now sold out, but I'm about to release a new Magnum, and there's only about 50 bottles. So that will be released within the next month. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, just keep following. So big things on the cards for the Garajeest. I'm very excited.
I'm getting the sense, and correct me if I'm wildly off track, that we're probably not going to see a Boyzone or a One Direction tribute wine coming out for you anytime soon, Callan.
No, unfortunately not. Or fortunately.
Ronan Keating does watch the show occasionally. I shall break it to him gently.
And I do like Ronan Keating. I have seen him live.
Well, I tell you,
and
we
I
do
am
have
single, Dan. Just
well,
if
we'll
Ronan
do some
is watching.
I'll do some marketing for you, Callan. We'll find you a nice Zimbabwean rock star to send down to Elgin. One last one for you, Boo, before we leave. We've been through a really, really tough year. Whoever you are, whether it's the wine industry or not, Zimbabweans, I find, are a fairly resilient lot. It's a country that has itself been through so much. How upbeat, how confident are you about the wine industry and what you see as the next couple of years?
So yeah, as Zimbabweans, we are survivors. In terms of the industry, I'm actually quite I'm positive. We've all taken a knock, but what I have seen is the sense of support, not just locally, but as well as internationally for South African wines as a whole. And that is just such an uplifting and encouraging thing to feel, and to have that support from everybody. I've noticed it among my private customers. I've noticed it on social media. I've noticed it with my importers. Just people wanting to actually buy the wines, get to know the brands, and as well as the producers and the winemakers. So as a whole, I'm very positive as to where the industry is going to go in the next couple of years. It would be amazing if the support just continues for us. So thank you to everyone who has supported and shown love and purchased our wines, and please continue to do so.
And you can buy them alone for the packaging and for the cool stories behind them, the doors and the boss. But it's the wine inside that is the real rock star story. Callan, thank you. It's been an absolute delight having you on the show. Let's do this again soon. And as I promised so many of our winemakers, just as soon as traveling gets a little easier, I look forward to getting down to Elgin. And perhaps by then, the House of the Garajeest is up and running. And that long overdue tribute to Luther Vandross is finally in a bottle.
Thanks. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
There we go. Callan Williams, the Garajeest from Zimbabwe via Elsenburg to one of the coolest bespoke labels. Garajeest in every sense, making wine out of Elgin at the moment, the Semillon and the very distinctive, quite fruity Cabernet Franc, but with more wine on the horizon. And together with Melissa Nelsen at Genevieve, two great women in our South African wine industry, making some terrific wine and doing so with great panache. That does it for Dan Really Likes Wine this evening, coming to you live from the Dan Nicholl Show studios as the two shows cross-pollinate. A reminder, if you're not already a member of the Pick and Pay Wine Club, it is free of charge. Sign up. You get some super deals. You get 3 times the Smart Shopper points on every single wine you buy, in a bottle, in a box, in a can. You also get 20% off 10 great wines every single month, plus deals on a case, deals on a Magnum, some cool competitions, including one coming up in May for Warwick that I'll tell you a little more about in the coming weeks. A reminder that tomorrow you'll be able to see a very special interview with Peter Tempelhoff at his new restaurant Beyond at Beit Verwachting, and coming up on Thursday, the wines of Cavalli, amongst others, as we continue to celebrate the wonder that is South African wine. Big thank you to Melissa, big thank you to Callan, big thank you to all of you for watching tonight. We'll see you back again live on Thursday. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening and keep supporting South African wine. Cheers. Goodbye.